All right, before we begin, a little bit of a public service announcement. More than likely, if you're looking into this, you have a computer background, IT background, and you understand what OpenClaw is. Because what it is an extreme security vulnerability and a huge danger just waiting to be set off. I suggest you not do it. But if you must, well, be very careful, all right? That's all I'm going to say. It's at your own risk. Don't hold me responsible if something catastrophic happens. The beauty of OpenClaw is it is pretty simple. I'm not taking away from the genius that is Peter Steinberger, the eventual sellout and sold his soul to Sam Altman type guy that founded and created OpenClaw. But at the end of the day, it's really just a wrapper and a bunch of plumbing or piping that's going to go out to the intelligence, your model, via an API typically, or plugging in your API key and connecting it. Well, it's not really anything that's like rocket science, for example. And before he did kind of slit his finger and dip his pen in that and sign away his life and soul to OpenAI, well, he at least open sourced it, which means a lot of us could get the source code, and a lot of other developers are now making branches and forks off of it that are pretty incredible and doing some really neat things. And one of those projects is actually by a hardware company by the name of Pico Claw. Now, Pico Claw, in its own words, is an ultra lightweight personal AI assistant. Memory usage under 10 MB, starts in under 1 second, supports multi-architectural deployment. From $10 hardware to high performance servers, AI is in reach. So now we're looking at this 10 MB, which is pretty incredible, which means we can start using single board computers. And today I'm going to walk through this. First, we're going to intro it, but I'm going to put it on a Raspberry Pi 2W, and we're going to see if we can get this running. Now, if we scroll down below here, just how it stacks up to the original OpenClaw and then to some other forks. So OpenClaw is going to use over 100 MB of memory. Same thing with NanoBot. Now, NanoBot was one of the first attempts to make a fork that's going to make this code a bit more efficient and smaller so that it can run on, let's call it, lesser than hardware than what OpenClaw requires. Now, even though they did that, they really didn't achieve, in my opinion, too much. It made it a little bit more efficient, but not a whole lot. But along comes PicoClaw. Now, PicoClaw, if you can see this, runs on less than 10 MB memory. So that's quite amazing, and it opens it up to what I'm going to be calling like edge claw, which means we can use very small single board computers with a Wi-Fi chip and be able to put on things like, in a Raspberry Pi's case, we can put on things like hats, which means we can make it battery powered. We can put solar because it has GPIO pins. We can put sensors off it, has the ability to hook up a camera. Do you see where I'm going with this? On the edge. It does have a one-click install. You're just going to go out, you're going to make sure Git's installed, you're going to clone the repository, it's going to make a directory here called PicoClaw, and then it's going to run this PicoClaw on boarding. Now, I've already walked through this and I did run into some troubles, especially on the Raspberry Pi. We'll get into that after we look at the GitHub. Now, if we take a look at the GitHub repository, it's going to give you a lot more information, but I think one of the cool things it says here, and I think it's pretty cheeky, it says run on $10 hardware with 10 MB RAM. That's 99% less memory than OpenClaw and 98% cheaper than a Mac Mini. Now, they are a hardware company, as I mentioned. I don't know them. I'm not affiliated with any of this. It is Cyped. And they have these little devices. This one's $9.90. They have a couple other ones, some with Wi-Fi. They also have like KVM switch. Imagine like a KVM switch with OpenClaw on it, just to give you an idea. So you could go there and get some of their hardware even for $10. So I love this because it's now approachable. I'm all about making devices and technology approachable. For 10 bucks, you're gonna have, albeit a lighter version, but you can still experience OpenClaw by using PicoClaw. The other thing that's really cool, and I'm seeing a lot of people do this, is you can put it on a phone. So if you have an old Android phone laying around, for example, you're going to be able to deploy it. So take a look at it here if you're interested in that. But as I mentioned, we're going to be putting this version on my personal Pi 02W and see if we can get it to work. Now, this is where I ran into a little bit of trouble earlier. I also tried to follow this install as well. But I'll tell you what I ended up doing because it was just a little bit different than this. So we'll get into that. But if you have a regular Linux distro, you're putting it on a PC or whatever, it's not a Raspberry Pi, you can more than likely follow this or that one-click install that we saw over here. And it's not a one-click, it's just a one-liner, okay? So if we go down here, it also has the ability to include it in a Docker container. Now that's really important because while this thing does sandbox itself out of the gate by putting it into its own folder system, there still is some things that can happen. So maybe even further isolating it inside of a Docker container might be a good way to go. So here's information on that as well. If we scroll down here, one of the things about this Pico onboard when I ran through it, I was expecting more of like an onboarding like we have with OpenClaw, where, you know, it really is just walks you through it. You cut and paste your API keys and everything else. That wasn't my experience. I actually had to go into this file right here to edit it. And when you edit this, you can go ahead and you can select your models. You can set up like your Brave API search key if you're looking to search the web. Highly recommend using Brave API. It's like 2,000 calls a day and it's free. Now it does say it has all this integration points here. Now I will say really quickly that I couldn't get anything to work except OpenRouter. So Anthropic, I take that back. I didn't try anything other than OpenAI, OpenRouter, and Minimax. And Minimax is not on here, but they've recently announced the support of it. And the only way I could get anything to work was going through OpenRouter. Now, OpenRouter is a service that, again, it's kind of like Olama now, where they have a cloud service where you can then connect to other models. So through OpenRouter, I was able to connect to Minimax, but directly through Minimax, I wasn't. I was not able to get OpenAPI running, OpenAI, sorry. And Anthropic is just a risk factor, because if you don't know, Anthropic, the overlords over there are super greedy, and they're pretty much cutting off one by one and even banning people for using third-party applications like this. I mean, I get it. Look, this is an open source solution that's better than their co-work, and they tried to sue the creator multiple times. So yeah, you can look that up. So it also has chat integration, so it still has Telegram and Discord, and in some other versions, remember this is Chinese, so some of these might not be like WeCom, you might not know what that is unless you're Chinese, but I'm going to be using Telegram in the future. So they also have their own social network, Claude Chat, similar thing to probably trying to, you know, clout chase a little bit for Maltbook. We mentioned this is where the configuration file, again, if you're going to be setting up stuff, you're going to want to familiarize yourself where this is. And inside of here, you're going to see inside of the workspace, it's going to create a folder or a workspace, and it's going to be contained inside there. You're going to see basically what makes this all work. The big thing now is moving to MD files. You put all your memories in there. I'm not going to go in depth about that because this is PicoClaw. And if you're interested, just go ahead and research. There's tons of people doing stuff on this right now, but I haven't seen anyone really talk about PicoClaw yet. And again, I'm excited because, yeah, I still have the same familiarity, the same structure, but it's going to be on a small device that I can power with a battery or slip into my pocket. I mean, it's right here actually. If we take a look at this, this is not the 2, this is a 1, but it's the same footprint. Imagine this, right? So this goes in your pocket, you connect it to your cell phone, you have a battery, maybe you connect it in via USB. There's also kits that you can make a USB stick out of this, so you can put it into maybe a server that's not even online and run against it, kind of like using that as a RAG. So this little device can run it, which is amazing. And yeah, these are more expensive, Raspberry Pi. Don't get me started on that. But this company here also offers some hardware if you're interested. And then you can look up, but pretty much anything that runs Linux, you're gonna be able to run this. So now that we've looked at all this, let's go ahead and start putting it on my Pi 02W and see what that process looks like. Right on my screen right now on the right, I just have a terminal. I'm connected via SSH into my Raspberry Pi. On the left is just some notes for me. But first and foremost, you need to make sure you have 2 things installed. You need to make sure you have Git installed, and then lastly, Go. If you don't have those things installed, I'll have some links down below as well as all these other commands. On the left-hand side, this is just my notepad so that I can follow along as well. First thing we need to do is issue this wget and copy this first line. That's going to go out and grab the repository for us. Now, this is very important because this one is exclusive to ARM64. So there is a release link inside of the GitHub, and there you'll find any releases that might be a little bit off. So if you are using a Raspberry Pi, no, you have to use this link. But if you're not using a Raspberry Pi, you might have to use another link. So once we do that and hit enter, that's going to go out and pull that down. Now, the next command we need to enter is right here. We're just tar which means we are going to unpack and unarchive it. Once we do that, you'll see here it says license, readme, readme, and Pico Claw. So I don't know if you really need to do this. I just changed some of the security here to make sure it would work, and I don't want to change it back because I know this process works. So go ahead and chmod and issue that command as well. Now, here's where it comes something interesting. We're ready to issue some commands. We can do this right here. It's actually ./PicoClaw. So if I do that and hit enter, what it's going to do is configure already exists. So I already have something already written there. So I am going to say, actually, that's interesting. I have it written there. It saved it. I thought I deleted that. But yeah, let's go ahead and overwrite that, hit yes. And this will give me kind of like a new install there. So once you're here, it says next steps, add your API key, and it gives you a link to where it's at, or at least a directory as to where it's at. And then it says, go ahead and set up all your API keys. So unlike that of ClawBot or OpenClaw, if you will, it's not going to lead you through it. So we are going to have to go ahead and execute this command in order to get it to work. Now, in terms of the JSON, this is what I have working right now. And I'll pull it up here on the Raspberry Pi as well, but this is what it will look like in text format. So the main things you want to notice here is I'm using the Minimax model. And as I mentioned, I could only get the Open Router to work. So you'll have to go to Open Router and then go there and sign up, put in some money, and then pick what model you want to use. And right here is where you'll put in the base, which is this, what you see right here if you're using Open Router, and then your API key, which you'll get from Open Router, and then that'll connect to whatever model you're using, and make sure that model that you've selected to connect is up here. So let me show you what it's going to look like initially. So if we go here and go sudo, let's see where it is, sudo nano, and it's in my home directory, JSON file here, open it up, and yeah, we can see it's the same thing here. So here's where I would come in and say model, and drop this in for Minimax 2, and go down. It also gives you the ability down below here to set up Telegram if you want. I'm not going to walk you through that part. It's pretty simple either way if you prefer to message this thing through Telegram versus something like SSH, which I'll probably do, but I want to keep this short, and you've probably seen how to do that. If not, it's in the documentation. Will be linked down below. And then if you scroll down to the bottom here, this again is where you'd put in your API keys. I tried OpenAI, couldn't get it to work, but Open Router, again, you would put in your API key here and the API base there. So I'm going to go ahead and upload my version really quickly, and then I'll be right back. All right, now I've got my configuration file all saved and it's ready to go. We need to issue the command. So right here is the command. It is just ./PicoClaw agent. Now I already have this running. If you haven't had this running before, it'll take a minute to get to this point, but if everything goes well, you will see this. It will say you. And this is where we can start interacting with our model. It should be connected. If you don't see this, this is when you're going to start wanting to troubleshoot that configuration file. So first thing I'm going to say is hello. And I'll probably say something like hello again or something like that. So it says, hey, all right, so it said still testing or you need something else? Yeah, well, we need something else. So I don't have a whole bunch hooked up to this, but I just want to show you really quickly what we can do. So I'm going to say, can you build a web page that says hello everyone on it with a big, well, sorry, let me go back, with a big heart on it as well. Let's see what it does there. So it's going to go out, ping the model, and start building, and hopefully we get a response. So want me to save it to file? There it is. So it looks like it went out and created a web page for us. So pretty cool, and even tried to do this. I don't know if that would be render or not, but it looks like it tried to make it that way. But nonetheless, it's just a quick way to prove that this thing works. So now let's just ask it something off the wall. So let's say, are wolves dogs, for example? And I want to see what it does for just like conversating with it. Now again, this is, yeah, so it came back. It says they're closely related and can interbreed, but they're not considered. Key differences: wolves are harder to tame. Dogs have evolved to digest starch. Interesting, I didn't know that. So maybe wolves still can't digest starch very well. So different social behaviors, but nonetheless, you can see here it is absolutely working. That is pretty cool. I mean, something as small as this, right? Something as small as this now, we can have a version of OpenClaw on it. Pretty sick if you ask me. So during this demo, I've actually had the Pi 02W on this. This is just the Raspberry Pi or Hackberry Pi Zero, I believe. I actually make another model that has a CM5 on it. I point over there because it's over there. So I have two of them. It's really cool. It has a physical keyboard, independent guy who did this, and has the old school BlackBerry like kind of trackpad on it. So pretty cool, especially if you're old school like me, to have it's tactile. But this gives me the ability to bring it mobile. And I think that's one of the strong suits that I'm looking at. As I mentioned, kind of putting this on the edge and using maybe those GPIO pins. So it absolutely works. I'll test it out a little bit more. I don't expect anything too crazy out of it. I have noticed it's a little bit slower for sure, as is to be expected, but it's just acting as this pass-through to the model. And I think it's pretty incredible. So I'll let you guys just kind of marinate on that in terms of what you can do. So don't inspect the world from it. It's a little quirky. I had to work with it for really quite a few hours to get it to the point where I could write down these instructions and at least figure it out for the Raspberry Pi. So if you are interested, again, it's down below. And if you are not subscribed, please consider subscribing. It helps me out a ton. And also please like this video so we can get it out to others. But this is crazy, man. Looks like OpenClaw has a little brother or sister or whatever you want to call it, a little micro crustacean called Pico Claw. Let's go. My name's HillPhantom. I'll see you next time.